So I wanted to share an experience I had this past month, and as part of our traveling oral argument program, we get to travel the state, interact with high school students and college students, and draw upon all of their inspirational energy as we do our jobs. And I met one young lady at Indiana Wesleyan University. She's a senior. She's a first generation college student in Indiana, and I had coffee with her before the traveling oral argument, and she was an amazing girl. So she's first gen, now vice president of the student body there. And after our chat, she followed up with an email, and she said this line that has resonated with me ever since. And that is, being the first to show others the way matters. Representation shapes possibility. Representation shapes possibility. And so I've been flying on that for, ever since I had that meeting with her. But I think that resonates with this group as well. We're here doing the very best we can to create policy and practices in Indiana to clear the path for kids like these who are looking for opportunity, and then we'll turn around and clear the path for others that follow. So I wanted to share that as inspiration for all of you, because I know that it really resonated in my world. We are, I think, just one shy from a quorum, so we'll hold off on any voting items. So we'll skip over the minutes for now. And Mark, do you want to start talking about the strategic plan? All right.
All right. Yeah, I think we're just waiting for a couple of people to join on Zoom on this cold and blustery day. We didn't get snow, but we got whatever we got now out there. So I don't know if that's any better at all. But we'll get rolling through. Our main item for today is really getting through our strategic plan. Most of you have probably seen copies of it 3 or 4 times now. We have vetted it through a full day strategic planning session, about 7 outside groups representing family, youth, and caregiver engagement, various internal groups, and about 500 different stakeholders associated with the Children's Commission. So we've done a very robust process this year. So as you're looking at, also know we did this a little bit differently than in the past. Instead of starting with the commission's ideas flowing down to our task force and committees, we really started with what's working, what are the issues they're seeing on the ground, what are they prepared to dig into at the task force level, and then look at flowing that upwards, where we're hoping that'll really yield some more tangible results from the people that are really on the ground forming the recommendations that come to us. So pretty exciting stuff there. So some things have changed, some things have stayed very much the same. A lot of wordsmithing has occurred in between things as well. So we'll see if my clicker is working. No. Okay, so we have a clicker assignment over there, but so I'm going to walk through a few of the things that really guide us in total before we get into some of our strategic plan goals. So first up, our overarching principles. You'll see a lot of these are similar to what we've had in the past, but this is kind of an exercise in words matter of how we structure these things. So first on the list, and very intentionally first, is amplifying voices. And this is the only place in the strategic plan where you're going to see the word must. The expertise of those with lived experience must be utilized in building our solutions. There's nothing we do without making sure that we have the people that are impacted by it being a part of the discussion, a meaningful part, a direct part. As a matter of fact, we'll get later into our committees where our recommendations must go through a committee of those individuals to go forward. So taking that very seriously in this one. Previous plan, it was certainly there, but it was more of something that we would try our best to do versus something that it's a mandate for us to do. Next up on that is one of our tried and true ones is bridging systems and silos. That one did not change a whole lot because that's really what our job is, to be that convener across all the different agencies and entities and make sure that we're looking at where there's gaps in communication and where there's gaps that folks just working together better and being introduced to each other and us playing kind of that matchmaker role can make all the difference in the world. Not everything we do is based on policy change or recommendations. Sometimes it's just based on making sure we're at the table together. Ensure data-informed approaches. Again, something that we've always made sure we have is that we don't do anything that isn't informed by data. It had some more specific language before about different types of data and levels of data and everything else. But as we've discovered, there's a lot of difference between evidence-based practices, promising practices, emerging practices, and everything in between. The main thing is we need to look at what is available and see if it actually informs our recommendation to go forward with those issues, regardless of what type of data we're looking at. Emphasis on prevention. We punched this one up a little bit more to really say we need more of a focus area on early intervention, upstream investments, and limiting the need for potential state involvement. This goes specifically into some of the stuff that we've looked at and saying any state involvement, whether we like it or not that it happens, can be very traumatic for the families we serve. And it's always better if we can meet them at the community level, at a preventative level, at a partnership level, whenever possible. That's not saying that that's something we're going to do by default in every single case, but the more of that we can do, the better off our families are going to be and the more connections we can build with them. Always looking at workforce and sustainability, saying, well, if we don't have the right people in the right places at the right level of quality, we're not going to do very good work. So we have to make sure that remains a part of our discussion. For some of our work, that's a more ancillary piece, but for other places, we need to be much more direct when we get into our mental health task force and things like that, where we know the shortage is a major part of the problem. And then lastly on there, and this one is actually a new one for us, enhanced public education and awareness. Really saying there's so much that we do that stays kind of encapsulated within the commission and with our agencies. And we really need to be reaching out more and building awareness of the different state systems and services that are out there. There's so many great services and offerings that we have that just the public has no awareness of. And there's things that the public needs that we don't have enough awareness of. So it's a two-way street there that we really wanted to put at the forefront of the work that we do. We need to make sure we're being informed by the public and that the public is informed of what we're doing. Not just for the sake of transparency, but for the sake of so we can meet each other halfway and help them at that level. So those are the overarching principles that really will guide any recommendation that comes through. Does it check these boxes? Have we made sure we went through these steps going into that? So any questions on those? All right, so next up on the next slide, we'll have, actually probably 2 slides ahead, we'll have how the commission does its work. And this is a little bit more about kind of our administrative practices of what we make sure we're doing and how we're doing it. Again, sorry for the slow slides up there, but so all these actually come from, and you'll see highlighted elements in there. The highlighted elements are all directly written in our code as guiding what we do. So fostering collaboration between the 3 branches and the various agencies of state government. Promoting data and information sharing across agencies at the state and local levels for the benefit of youth and families. Examining data, again, we covered that earlier, and yes, it's here again because we're going to see a lot of repetition of children and families and of data and making sure we're informed, but we're informed about what impacts the people we're here to serve. Identifying gaps and researching promising and evidence-based practices. Integrating lived experience. Again, we punched this one up a little bit more forward still, saying like it needs to be integrated. It's not just a thing that we do or a survey that we get or somebody we ask. It's a part of the recommendations that we form. Consulting with agencies, organizations, and practitioners with the practical expertise on the ground. Again, something that we've always done that we'll continue doing. Recommending legislation, policies, and procedures for adoption by the state. Those are kind of our big tangible products that go out, aside from the other types of work that we do around this table. And then promoting evidence-based practices for entities serving youth and families, making sure when we do have an evidence-based practice that's gone past that promising practice or that emerging practice realm, that we look at promoting those however we can to make sure they're being used at that local level. All right. So now we get into the real meat of what the commission is going to look like in the next couple of years. So We've done a little bit of casual restructuring. Most of it is kind of for the sake of names and stuff. So as we go through, I'm going to explain that a little bit of what that looks like. So we're going to see committees and task forces. Committees are understood to be the items that really, they look across various aspects of the commission's work. So they cross-sect beyond just a specific task or a specific issue that we're looking at. So the biggest new one on that list will be the Youth, Family, and Caregiver Voices Committee. So they'll support the commission and all of our task forces on the integration of lived experience. So they are that hub to make sure that we're doing that and we're doing that well. They will also vet all recommendations and practices of the commission. So there's nothing that we create that isn't vetted through that entity of making sure it's been informed by the people we're serving. And they will also be a part of, we had assigned to us in House Enrolled Act 1098 recently, the creation of a statewide youth, family, and caregiver engagement plan that would be part of the guiding principles for other state agencies and organizations to look to of best practices in doing this exact type of work. So they'll be a part of forming that plan as well. So they have a lot on their plate. I know they're in early formation, and Audriana will be talking to us later about some of the work they're doing to get that together. These are always tough things that we want right away, but we want to do the right way. And those things always mean that we've got to make sure we're doing it precisely and have a plan for how we're going forward. So our other committees, the data committee, which is one of our existing ones, and that supports the work of the commission by really making sure everything we have, we're looking at the data, we're looking at the evidence, and they again will vet every commission recommendation. So you'll see this on here that we have the Youth, Family, and Caregiver Voices vetting every recommendation, and we have the data committee vetting every recommendation. Those are two things that must be in every single recommendation. It has sound data and it's got the voices represented in it. So both of those are going to be lifted up very heavily in there. Now for a new but old and kind of somewhere in between place on our strategic plan, we have the Youth Justice Oversight Committee. So we've talked about this one back and forth a lot over the last couple of years. So this is something that was created based on some recommendations of the commission, went through legislation, worked to develop some reports and recommendations for the state that led to some grant funding and other opportunities that we have out there now. So we've been looking at how that folds back into the commission. So this is actually going to cross-sect with another group I'll talk about in a little bit, but the Youth Justice Oversight Committee, the long game on this one is it's going to continue all the work and projects it's doing now, but it'll also slowly move more into the juvenile justice range of things that we had elsewhere in the commission. We're not going to remove that from the commission, but as the Youth Justice Oversight Committee comes in, there's no reason that we have two youth justice focused entities working at the same time. As a matter of fact, we've already seen a few points of duplication over the last couple of years of working with them. We're saying, is this helping or hurting that we have them in two separate spaces? So that will be one that will get defined a lot more over the next year as we make those transitions. But this is firmly saying, yes, that is a committee of the Children's Commission that will still have that same structure and bodies and stuff under it, but that's where its administrative home lies. So kind of a streamlining piece there. To make sure we have all that. And again, when there's anything youth justice related that's going to come up from the commission, it will get vetted through them first, just like our other committees. So any questions, thoughts on the committees?
Mark, is there a master list of each of the members on these committees?
We do have that. I think Blaine's doing the updating on it right now. Yeah, so on the website, you should see them, and they're usually as current as in the last 2 weeks. We do have some ebb and flow on them, but please look on there. And as commission members, you are always in a position to say if there's somebody you want to recommend that isn't on there, that should be on there, that could be on there. We always look at that very seriously too, to make sure we've got that filled out appropriately. Yeah. All right. So now to the real meat of our discussion, looking at our strategic goals. I'll take a little bit longer on the first one, just so we kind of see the format that we're going with on this. There was a lot of discussion with our strategic plan specifically about how much can we measure the end impact of the recommendations and the policy changes we recommend. And that's a really hard thing because we're usually not the ones that are actually implementing it. And also there's usually a lot of stakeholders doing a lot of work on some of the things that we talk about. So if we talk about reducing homelessness, that's great, but there's not a number we can put on there to say the commission reduced homelessness by 5%, because we're not in a range where we can take credit for having done that. So that was a lot of our discussion saying, do we dive deeper into having those quantifiables, or do we really look at what is the job of the commission? So you'll actually see at the top of all of our task forces, one, which task force has been assigned to each strategic goal, but then also very similar language across all of them, saying their job is to provide information to the commission, present recommendations, and provide follow-up on prior information and recommendations. So you're going to see that across all of them because they really all have that same job. And if they're not bringing things to the commission, then we need to reassess if that task force is operating as it should. Now, all of those things that they bring up will be on that list that comes afterwards of the areas that they will be working on. So in this case, the first one is the Child Health and Safety Task Force. And you can see a few different things that we have on there. Again, some of these are very similar. We did do a little wordsmithing. So the first one, increasing community-based social and concrete supports for families with children, including formal and informal familial caregivers. That sentence actually got a little bit longer, but only because it formerly read kinship care. Kinship care has become a more formal term within certain institutions. And we didn't want to say like, oh, it's ones that are in the kinship system, but not all the other people that are helping with this family, that are maybe even not blood related family, but family nonetheless. We wanted to make sure that there was no disagreement of who we were talking about there. So we're talking about whoever's in that role of being part of the caregiving of the child, making sure they have the supports they need. So we just broadened that out a little bit more so we weren't looking like we're getting overly prescriptive. Next, increasing housing stability for families and children. Again, this one is largely the same, what was added at the end, including transitioning youth. Youth that are transitioning out of systems often face housing barriers, whether it be that they're aging out of foster care, whether it be that they're leaving an incarceration or anything in between of that. We know a lot of times they get lost in that housing discussion. So we added that on to say, as much as we could say that, well, when we talk about housing stability for families and children, that's assumed that that would be in there. It really felt necessary to spell that one out a little bit more because it is pretty specific. Next, this one I don't believe had any changes in wording. So number 3, promoting healthy teen relationships, preventing unplanned pregnancy, reducing the risk of sexual victimization of children and youth. So that one is pretty much the same as it was before for that task force. Slight rewording on number 4, increasing awareness and access regarding developmental and health services for children and youth. This is where a lot of our groups that work on the developmental end all the way through the end of some of the services the health department's providing work under that. Again, it can still be very specific things they work on. So if they want to say we want to get our developmental screening rate up, this gives them that range to be able to do that. But it gives them the freedom to also say, hey, if what we thought was the right thing to research, we actually find this along the way, we can pivot and move into something that makes more sense for the commission to consider. The new one on this list, and probably the one that we heard the most when we did some of the stakeholder engagement, is we need to talk about some of the safety factors in communities. And there was actually quite a list of ones that especially our youth and our parents brought up. But what we realized is we've been somewhat ancillary to those discussions. So we need to give them a goal that's open enough where they can start doing some exploration and probably look at coming to the commission and saying, here's some specific issues now that we've really dove into it that need more attention from the commission. So things that have been under that, safe pathways to school, water safety has been a large emerging one, traffic safety for drivers, firearm safety and storage, all those types of things that the community is saying, hey, we have some real concerns and this is leading to really bad outcomes for our youth. That's where that one would be housed. So we expect this one to have a lot of our family and youth members want to be a part of the group that gets created under that. So any questions on goal number 1?
Yeah. Number 3, you got the promoting of the healthy relationships, but would that do you think that would incorporate like the child sex trafficking and stuff that's going on too? Would that fall into that category, do you think?
Yeah, we have a separate group on commercial exploitation of children, so they'll be listed in one of the other ones specifically. So this would be, it relates to it because this is more about front loading them so they're not becoming victims, but then how do we react after the fact? So we do have both ends of that covered. All right, so our next goal, going into goal number 2, this is looking at the mental health and substance use services for children, youth, families, and caregivers. So you see this one gets the bigger sentence because we're acknowledging, saying, look, it's not just about services for the youth. You've got to serve the whole family, what their needs are, because that will impact the children that are in that family unit as well. So this is our mental health and substance use task force. They had a change midterm where it was listed as substance abuse, and substance use was more accurate, especially that allows us the language to say when we get kids that are doing some risky behaviors and maybe sampling some substance use. It's not abuse yet, but we know we need to intervene at that point. It just opened that up a little bit more for that preventative side of it. And these are all ones that came directly from the task force. So they really wanted to focus on identifying community, early care, and school-based opportunities to partner on mental health. Make sure they're a part of that early conversation. Looking at collaboration support, especially for the children and youth with high acuity needs. We still have those ones that we've got to wrap a lot around them to make sure we're doing that correctly. So they really want to put that one front and center. Looking at infant and early childhood mental health needs. That's a common one that we see, especially when we look at youth that enter care at a very early age. There's some very, very specific needs that can impact their development early on if we don't have the right services and supports in play there, or ones that have an acute medical illness and other things. All those things have an impact. So having that as a separate entity there as well. Promoting evidence-based prevention practices, specifically looking at substance use as well, looking towards that preventive aim. And we can't have mental health without talking about workforce development and appropriate reimbursement for services. This has been the discussion for as long as I've been talking about mental health, and I know we're not there yet. We've got a lot of good things coming down the pike that I think are going to lead to some real improvements there, but obviously we want to continue being a part of that discussion. Any thoughts on strategic goal number 2? All right. Then number 3, improving educational outcomes of children and youth. This one, the most of the change in here, and I'll note it later on when we get to some of kind of the general things we did in the plan too, is this was specifically aimed largely at youth in state care. But most of the work we've done with education has really gone much more broadly from that, because again, if we're looking preventatively, we're looking at all the educational environments they're in. And you know, I would like to say that all of our schools are a form of the state trying to care for our youth as well. So separating ourselves from that discussion didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So as we're diving in more, so we'll see the goals, improving access to high quality early care and education. We know that's been a big topic, whether it be where we get into childcare or where we get into that preschool education. We know that's something that the state's trying its best to find the magic formula to get more involved there and more invested there. We've made some steps forward, and then we've had to do some reassessments back and forth, but we know we want to be part of that discussion. Number 2 is a very big and broad one, improving school climate. This one incorporated a whole bunch of other things that are involved in the school day. But looking at improving the school climate, so do the students feel safe? Do they feel like they're able to learn? Do they have the tools they need? Do they have the appropriate staffing and supports in that school day? Because we know we've got to look at supporting our professionals that work with our youth as well when we look at how we can have a good school climate. And interestingly, I always look at a lot of the surveying. We've got youth reporting in some schools that they're more concerned about the adults that are caring for them than they're worried about their own peers. So they're seeing the stress in the professionals that are working for them and saying somebody needs to be helping them out because they're not doing okay and they need more supports. So we know we need to do more in that range. Improving access to quality, appropriate education for youth in residential, detention, and corrections facilities. So here you see where that emphasis was on youth in care, just making that a separate thing and saying we really need to, instead of talking about youth in care generally, make it its own goal and saying, how do we make sure that when youth are in state care, in a state institution, that they're getting appropriate education? And at the end of that as well, including transitioning students, because a lot of these youth move in and out, move through foster care settings, and it's very common that their education becomes the thing that gets left behind a little bit, because it's hard to re-engage in education. And if you miss a month and now you have to go back, all of those different things, right? Next, after that, promoting access to post-secondary education and workforce readiness. This is where our partners at DWD have been fantastic. But we know we can engage students better in primary and secondary school when they know they've got a path after that. And that we're doing good work saying, do we have them prepared where they can see a positive future coming out of the education that they have? And do they have the right opportunities to go in that direction? A lot of talk at the state's course has been about apprenticeships and other skilled trades work. So this flows right into that. Do we make sure our schools are equipped to engage all types of students so they can have that positive relationship and be able to transition out of school and into the workforce, whatever that looks like for them. And then the last one on the list, one we've worked on heavily in the last couple of years through our work with the Forum for Youth Investment, promoting student and family engagement and reducing absenteeism. So chronic absenteeism has been a huge focus. Senator Donato's passed a couple of bills related to that. We've got some other good internal practices going on in our discussions with Department of Education. So really just saying, as our project with the Forum for Youth Investment nears its end, actually in June of this coming year, that we've found that, guess what, engaging parents and students and reducing absenteeism isn't going to magically be done by then. That's a continuous effort. And sometimes when we take our foot off the gas on that one is when we see the slippage. So we know we need to keep engaging on that issue and being involved there. Any questions on the educational outcomes goal number 3?
Number 1 means this group, improving access to high quality early care and education for children.
Mm-hmm. So that's really looking at what the educational environment looks like as we get into things that are embedded into the path to quality institutions, the preschools, and everything that leads into the school environment as they get into primary education. So we have OE CASEL and some others there as well. So some of that will be, obviously we know we've got a provider shortage definitely at that end. And we've got cost barriers as well. So access is a very global term we're using there to cover both ends of that, because we know there's a shortage of quality in some areas, there's a shortage of affordability in others, there's a shortage of providers, period, in many areas as well. So we know it's a very global issue. Part of that will be really this subgroup researching what is the commission's role going to be in putting forward recommendations that can help there. So that's where we might get a little bit more laser focused than some of the entities that are working very broadly on this issue and saying, but what is a policy change that can be made? What can we do across state agencies that can improve that? And some of that might be that we have agencies that all have a piece of this particular item, just sharing their information and working more strongly together. So it could even not be a recommendation. It could be just, we need to be on the same page here. And I think a lot of that came from the fact that early care and education does have a tremendous amount of stakeholders. And depending what scale you look at, 4 or 5 different state agencies that have a piece of that, whether it's credentialing facilities, whether it's the educational curriculum, whether it's some of the nonprofit partners that we have to look at all the different elements of that and train the professionals to go into that field.
I appreciate that. It's where maybe I'm having some struggle with some of these more global words because it makes it so big that how do we know what that success actually looks like at the end or where our role is for engagement here? And I hesitate to kind of wade into this and muddy the waters here because I know we're so far down the path here. But I'm wondering if it is worth thinking about some of these bigger and global words like access to really hone in. What is this? What is the role and responsibility of the commission here in these areas? Is it coordinating efforts across agencies? Is it coordinating efforts across branches of government? Like what does that actually mean for us? And I think a couple of these different, points.
Yeah.
Because we've gone through now 3 of these strategic goals and they are huge.
Yes, they are. And that's where I think we really established the accountability, that the internal process could be for each one of these items on the list. They should once per year have where they're providing a presentation to the commission of what their findings are, what the items they've found that they can dive deeper into, and get that feedback from the commission of, now let's tune that in.
Yeah.
So we left it broad for the discovery portion of the discussion, but when they come back to us is when we start really tuning that.
Can I ask, do you think that there are questions going after tomorrow?
That's that again.
The questions going that we're looking answers for, you think they're too broad? Or do we need to hone down on, what would you suggest?
I do think we need to hone down, I think especially on the ones that include the word access. That means so many different things to so many different people. And granted, I'm very new here, so I apologize for my kind of lack of historical knowledge here, but the role of the commission is to kind of, in my estimation, review, provide recommendations for action, and you could come up with 55 recommendations for access to early care and education that may be some of these outside of the scope of what the role of the commission may be. But Mark, to your point, like that's what the committees are for, to get us to that closer, what does access mean to us?
Yeah, and this is always the tough balance we've had, and we've had a lot of discussion saying, well, we could put measures on every single one of these, but we couldn't really say that the commission is explicitly the entity that made that happen. But as we form the recommendations, remember, they all have to be data informed, they have to be vetted through all of our entities, they go through about 4 layers before we see them here. That is where definitely there's nothing that's going to come in front of the commission as a recommendation that doesn't have some very clean and clear measures and expectations and outcomes on it. So yes, it is tough, and I never love having really global terms. Apparently, yeah, apparently our state government's like, no, we're clocking out early this year. Clocking out a little early this year. Let's see. Okay, I think we're back now. Now we get to go back from all my random clicking when it wasn't working. And then you go back too far, and then you gotta go back in. This could be a great couple of minutes here. So, okay, I think we're back in action, Blaine?
Yeah.
All right. So promise we're almost through it, having to listen to Mark talk a whole bunch. I wrote this, so it's my own fault. Strategic goal number 4. Now, this is what we talked about the Youth Justice Oversight Committee coming in, because this used to be the work of our Juvenile Justice and Cross-System Youth Task Force. So we had a lot of talk with them over the last really couple of years about what does it mean as the Youth Justice Oversight Committee comes more into its own independent being under the commission. What does that mean for impacting this group? So we're not having just straight up duplication between the two. And what was really found is that they'd like to continue definitely working on some of the same issues that they've been working on. However, it is really time to reframe that and say, let's look at those multi-system youth. And that might be youth that, yes, there are justice involved and DCS has a hand there. It might also mean they have some special educational needs. Anything in between all of that, they could be in the foster care system. The youth that are getting a lot of different system involvement all at once, or hopping from one system to the next and back again, how do we make sure that they're not getting lost in the shuffle? So that's really a lot of the discussion going on there. We'll have our presenter talking later on when we get to our task force presentations a little bit on what they're doing there. But that was really the idea of, let's not detach from a lot of the quality work we're doing for youth that we know have some very complex system involvement, but let's not make it exclusive to ones where one point of that involvement is juvenile justice. So a little bit of a change there, but really a lot of their goals stayed very, very similar. So going through that, so number one on their list there is, as Representative Vaughn pointed out, looking at the identification, referral, and system responses and services for victims of commercial sexual exploitation of children. So that's a committee that's been working independently of the commission and then came into the commission, and that we see definitely, unfortunately, an issue that's not going away anytime soon that we need to keep really working on. So, well, as we have that other side of making sure that our youth are given the right safety education so they're not getting in these situations. We know there's plenty of youth that still will. We've not perfected any of the protections on this yet, and we need to keep working hard. So that group will continue working on that. Identifying gaps and solutions for dual status youth and those involved with multiple systems. So where are the places where things are not continuing, where things are falling on the wayside, where things are getting missed in the mix? We talked about education earlier as being one of the common ones there, but also family engagement. That can really fall out of that. So we that in some of our other goals as well. So making sure we're still talking about the science of child development in our system responses, that as they're moving back and forth and sideways, are we actually giving them things they need to grow and be prepared for adulthood? We get a lot of youth that maybe at 18 are coming out of the system, and I've seen both ends. I've seen ones where I'm like, you've got, the life skills of maybe a 12-year-old, and you've got the life skills of maybe a 30-year-old. But either way, we're missing some of the stuff that goes in between all of that. So we need to make sure that we're giving them the proper tools to develop as good, responsible adults. And that involves going through all the right childhood stages as well in that way. So making sure that that's a part of what we're thinking of when we're thinking about these youth that are getting moved all around. Because it is, I think we've all probably seen some of it, and it's a sad thing when they've exited the state systems, but we know that there's a lot left to do to make sure they're prepared to be an adult now. Number 4, promoting family and caregiver engagement at all stages of system involvement. So as we've mentioned repeatedly, it's easy when things get shifting around that sometimes the family engagement piece goes to the wayside or just becomes less of the immediate focus. And we want to keep that front and center however we do that. That is the biggest tool for resiliency across the board for most of our youth, is when they have engagement from the family members, those caregivers, those close adults in their life. And we don't want to have gaps come into that, because that sends a very poor message to the child about their self-worth. Then last on there, improving the transitions of existing systems or transitioning between systems. So that movement, again, as it happens, look at this as more of, we talked in some of the other ones about the developmental pieces and the family pieces, but this is more about the logistical elements of, do we do that cleanly, where when it goes from this system to this system, they're talking to each other. They know what happened here and what needs to happen here. Is there planning happening as we move those transitions that meets the needs of the child and meets all these other categories as well? Which, again, I think all of our systems try their best at. So this is more about how can we make sure they have the tools to do it as well as possible, because that leads to success. That leads to less likelihood of recidivism. And it just makes sure that we have the positive outcomes we're really hoping for the youth and the family that they end up with. Yeah.
This last one, improving the transitions of youth exiting systems or transitioning between systems. Is this a youth-focused activity, or is this a systems-focused activity? Are we improving the youth experience, or are we improving the systems?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's that we're improving the systems, and then that's measured in the impact on the youth's quality of transition.
And I don't want to put them on the spot, but with our youth representatives here, do you feel like we can do better? Helping kids that are transitioning
I
and
think it's mainly like I think it's mainly the communication between like the different departments and then them getting lost in the transition into adulthood, if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And we can look at some slight rewording of that one, if that would be helpful. So improving how systems.
I want to make sure that we're
Mhm.
naming the problem. It's the system that's the
Yes.
problem, not the experience of the youth that are the
Yeah,
problem. Is that?
yeah. Yeah, because, yeah,
Oh, I'm Eden Beasy. I'm a deputy health commissioner with the Department of Health. So I'm here representing Dr. Weaver. Yeah.
And this will look at the continuum for a child, not just youth exiting care.
right, right. At every point of transition
Yeah.
that occurs there. And some of that is too, I mean, looking at defining and saying, well, what are the transition points? Because I think this is actually where it'll be really helpful talking to the youth representatives and our other youth members on the commission, because even what we consider a transition and what we don't consider a transition, when did they feel like they were moved or changed? And a lot of times that doesn't match the way we think it does. It's like, well, you went from DOC and then you went into this. I'm like, no, they're talking about every time that they changed their therapist or when they had a new case manager 6 times, and they were just getting to know them and what impact did that have? So I think some of what we need to do there is really getting that level set of what are the transitions from the youth's perspective? Because where we think we might be failing them, they might be like, no, this is when I felt like I was left behind. And I think that's something we really need to take pause and do. So yes, and any minor wordsmithing on this is always welcome. This isn't a document that if we're not changing intent, we're changing its readability. And this is an amalgamation of lots of people's words. So I'm always open to what makes it more readable to the next person that's going to be looking at it.
Can we define, are you talking about youth or are children included in your definition of youth? Like age groups, right? Like,
Yeah. And it's tough. And actually, we have the overarching, and this is part of the going back and forth on the wordsmithing. Most areas in the plan, you'll see that we say children and youth. So that one probably should have children and youth. I think that'd be an appropriate fix on that one to make sure we're just saying like, oh, but in this one, we're only talking about the older ones.
yeah.
Since we went to children and youth on everything else, now we're saying, well, we don't care about the children, just the older ones.
You know, you,
Yes. And that goes right in line with some of those developmental aspects that we're looking at in the other ones too, and saying, look, if they're having inappropriate transitions, we're stopping and starting how they develop their trust with the adults in their life. And that's pretty huge. So I think that's a good recommendation. So I'll switch the systems to more of the front of that discussion. So it doesn't look like that's the secondary piece of it, but it's the primary piece of it, and make sure that we reflect children and youth. All right. And then see, we're almost there. So number 5, and our newest one, this is one that came in kind of midpoint through our last strategic plan. And actually a good example of why we try to have, at least in the strategic plan, this document, some slightly broadened language, because we always find an issue halfway through where we're like, do we really have a place for that in our strategic plan? Or do we need to start over again and interject something in? So this is a group that was created halfway through because we really didn't have a home that spoke specifically to these issues. And we felt like, we could sandwich it into something else we do, but it really is large and broad and important on its own, and we need to reflect that. So this is looking at systems and methods for addressing suicide prevention, bullying, and online safety. You will see that they have a couple less points under them, and that is because most of this is focused on making sure we have the youth, family, and caregiver voices on it. And they're doing a lot of detailed research and a lot of detailed work really forming what are the gaps, what are the missing pieces, what are the best practices, because there's so much there that we really want to make sure they feel informed and empowered on their end. So this group by far is the one that has the largest amount of youth, family, and caregiver representation. And I think that's fair that it should, because there's a lot of things in all of these items that we can make large scale, more academic assumptions on, but we need to hear about how it's being impacted on the ground, right? So you have three groups that really get formed under that, having similar descriptions and goals, but reducing risk factors and building protective factors regarding youth suicide and responding to its impact, looking at an emphasis on screening, education, programming, and supportive services. So this was written directly by that subgroup that said, this is the language that we think works for all the things we're diving into. And they're looking forward to coming and giving some feedback on what they've been doing so far and what their progress has been there. But they're taking a very deep dive on a very broad issue, and I commend them for doing that. Next up, looking at reducing risk factors and building protective factors regarding bullying of children and youth while responding to its impact, with emphasis on both prevention and responsive policies and practices. And that's really acknowledging saying bullying, we always want to reduce, but we've got some flaws in how we're responding and some of the reporting and other things that really we can't let go of that, because the response matters on a very broad way, not just to the person that was a victim of bullying, but the person who was maybe the person initiating the bullying behavior there too. That sends up some flags that we need to get some services involved, whether they be community-based or something else. But if we don't have the right identifiers and the right response system, we're not going to really get to the root of what's going on there. By the way, I will note that this is the one group that, as they built their own, I was having talk with Judge Kenworth the other day about making sure when we're looking at adverse childhood experiences, we're looking at the protective end of that as well. They self-identified and said, why are we just talking about responding after the fact? We need to talk about protective factors, and we need to build those. So that came from our youth, family, and caregivers saying like, no, we want to talk both ends of this. We realize we're ones who've been impacted by it directly, and we're often on the response end of it. And we would, sometimes we get driven to just want to respond, but they were the first to say, we need to make sure as little of this happens as possible. So I thought that was very good that they thought about it a little bit more deeply than some of our professionals did. And they're pretty good at pointing those things out. So their last one, this one's a little bit different than the other two, but I think rightfully so. But number 3, analyzing gaps in knowledge, programming, and interventions while promoting strategies, education, and resources that improve online safety, reducing the risks and increasing protective factors faced by children and youth online. So they're pretty much saying there's not enough of a discussion happening in this space, and there's not enough being done to say, what do we need to be safe online? Yes, being online less would be a good thing, but are we being taught how to be safe online? Are we getting kind of almost a consumer education of what to look for and what to avoid and how to guard yourself in those spaces? And a lot of them were saying like, we've got a lot of adults that didn't grow up in those spaces, so they're just saying back away and put everything down. So they were really big at saying, let's dive in and see what actually makes a difference. And with it being a very real space for some of them and a lot of their social life, they're like, we need to know how to protect ourselves in that space. Because even if we've got our phone down 80% of the day, the other 20%, as soon as we pick it up and enter into a chat or something else, or even try to play a game online, somebody's trying to take advantage. So we need to know how to respond.
I noticed it's been on the news lately a little bit that they're recommending that no social media allowed for students under 16. I thought it was, if I read it right. But I don't know if that's something that we could look at as well.
Yeah, I know the research has been pretty clear. There's actually a couple of bills that have been proposed for legislative session that I think when we get into the legislative update, this certainly gives us permission to say, as legislation gets filed and stuff, do we see if there's a spot where the commission can add something to that discussion? Because I know the research has been relatively clear about the ideal world being 0. And the tough thing is, but we've got a very real world of they've got a lot of access to all these things. And are we chasing a winning argument there or not? And I think we have to look at both ends of it and saying, how much can we reduce? But we've got to look at protective factors at the same time, no matter how we do it. But I think we will have plenty of room to engage on that because the research is pretty clear and it's actually growing to say less and as close to 0 as possible is a very good thing. So any questions on that last one? And I know they've got a little bit more of a complex list of words and everything in there, but they were really emphatic, saying that we want to make sure we list out all the different ways that we're going to be researching these issues, because we want it to be signaled to saying we're diving in as deep as we can. And goal 5 is the last one. So I just have a couple of notes to end that on of things we did as we're going into it. This goes back to when we were talking about the Youth Justice Oversight Committee coming in and us looking at some of the wordsmithing. And this might just be me showing a little OCD too. So the entities that exist under our task forces have been formally called subcommittees. We also have a separate entity called committees. So it led to a little confusion on the outside. So the Youth Justice Oversight Committee actually has subgroups that are called work groups, and we think that that's probably a more accurate reflection of our task forces as well. So those secondary groups under our task forces will be considered as work groups. It doesn't change anything about them. It's a name change. But if you're used to hearing subcommittee, you'll be hearing work group. So we're not confusing folks being like, how do you have a subcommittee that's under a task force and the committees are over here? So we've had that pointed out a few times. It's just a cleanup item. So as you see that. One also, we had in our previous strategic plan a lot of references to, and it's quote, end quote, vulnerable youth. In our code, there's a lot of references to vulnerable youth, and it is defined as youth that are specifically within certain state systems. Our work has been much more broad than just youth that are directly, actively, currently in state systems for a very long time. But also, as we've reached out and talked to our youth representatives and others that are part of our work, the term vulnerable youth wasn't seen as particularly strength-based, because it makes it sound as a weaker than, lesser than, kind of we're here to rescue word. And it was an easy one to say, well, in the strategic plan, that public-facing document, is that necessary? And does it even reflect specifically what we're doing? Especially since it has its own little sub-definition afterwards, we'd have to add every single time. So a minor change as far as our wording, you won't see that vulnerable youth in the strategic plan. I don't think it changes any intentions, but I think the public messaging is a little bit better and cleaner when we look at really showing respect for the youth that are part of our systems. So minor change there. And then the last one on the list, again, the Youth Justice Oversight Committee integration. Just know some of that will continue over the next year as we look at what that actually looks like on some of the pragmatic pieces and bring its work groups in and everything, because it's going through some changes as well. But I think we covered that a lot earlier. So that's the big items I have on that. And that is our strategic plan. So looks like we have some folks online now too. So I think we have a quorum. So if we want to look at approving.
Any further discussion regarding the proposed strategic plan? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve?
So move.
Thank you, Rep. Devon. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Krupp. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving the proposed plan, say aye. Aye. And we've got Bernice online. Looks like she voted aye as well. Anyone opposed, say nay. All right, we are approved. We'll move right into the legislative updates, and we are behind schedule, so I'll ask you to streamline to the extent you can.
We can do that. There's nothing going on legislatively right now. So, I mean, we can pretend, right? And I don't have a huge amount here. Last session, we had a couple of very substantive bills that were commission bills that looked at reintegrating the Youth Justice Oversight Committee, added our family, youth, and caregiver engagement pieces. So this year is a little bit more streamlined on that. So I'm not going to have a ton for us to go through in detail here. Biggest item we have, and we voted on it over the last couple of meetings, we will have a bill that I don't have a bill number yet. I'm waiting. I'm watching those file lists as they come in. That Senator Donato will be taking the lead on the Senate side. This will be the one looking at for youth in detention, family visitation rights. Again, looking at having those guaranteed 2 phone contacts and 2 in-person contacts. per week for that youth being that standard. Again, we talked to the association related to that, went through what their standards were, and we continue to be in part of that dialogue because we know once legislation drops, we'll get more feedback. But as of now, every entity that we've spoken to says this really falls in line with what they already have, or is really close to it, and they don't see any additional cost or administrative barriers to it. So we'll see as that fleshes out. Some of those numbers might change a little bit, but I'll be tracking that one directly through session, testifying on it as a commission bill. And we think having that floor set of that guaranteed visitation is going to be a very positive thing for the youth and the family members that are involved with those youth that are at that level of care. So that's the big one that we have attached as we're going forward into things. So beyond that, we'll have a few other items that have been brought forward. I will note, this is where it always gets a little bit tricky, so I like to clarify. When we have issues that are already covered in our strategic plan, which we just voted on and approved, thank you, those are issues that as needed, I am allowed to interact with when it comes to legislation. Now that's done very carefully. It's almost always going to be I'm neutral on the bill because bills change, believe it or not. Our legislators have never, I know, shocking. They changed through session. So if I were to testify on something to be very specific to say this language in this bill is something the commission's working on and is supportive of seeing what we can be doing as a state better. Something along that line. We also don't offer negative testimony. And if I'm testifying on any bill that has any agency component to it, we consult with that agency first. So it's not done as something where I get to just go rogue and pick a bunch of bills that I think would be fun to talk about, which usually I'm busy enough that that's not a good idea anyway. So those that are in the strategic plan are covered pretty openly already. So we talked about some of those things with online safety, and I think there's a water safety bill that got brought in there. So our new goal under that first one would definitely fall right in line with that. So those are specifically noted in there. So on the list for today, I just pulled out 2 items that we could make an argument that they're in there, but are fairly specific. So I wanted to pull out directly. Both of these do have bills attached to them, but since again, they're not commission bills, I talk about the issues within the bills, not endorsing the bills in totality. One is on problem-solving courts. This basically establishes an empty fund for problem-solving courts. It would allow some carryover from budget allocations, but also allow them to take donations, get opioid settlement funds, and other things would go into this fund. Why does that matter? Because problem-solving courts, their budgets can vary dramatically based on the complexity of their cases and the number of their cases. So some years they may overspend, some years might be underspending, and this just gives a placeholder to say money that has been given for problem-solving courts has a home in the budget separate to itself. So that bill, it's a bipartisan bill. It's Senate Bill, House Bill 1046. I was almost there. Still working on memorizing them as they flow in. So 1046. So we'll be watching that one closely. Problem-solving courts do a lot of the exact things that we've talked about here today and making sure we make the right connections. We transition strongly. We find that right permanent home for the youth at the end of the day. All those elements. So it's a pretty specific bill, not a lot of unintended consequences range in there, creating an empty fund to make sure that there's funding available as needed. So we'll look forward to that. And then foster youth rights and services. So there is a bill for a foster youth bill of rights. Foster Success, one of the groups that we work with a lot for our youth representatives and others have put that forward. Really looking at a lot of practices that are pretty much already standing under DCS, and I don't want to speak for Director Krupp there, but saying, do we want to have that signaled in code directly, just like we have foster parent bill of rights?
Yeah, I would just add that we've worked with Foster Success on preliminary drafts of that, and we support fully as well. And I think we're pleased with what's been filed.
Great. So, so those are the 2 items I have for today. For potential legislative interaction beyond what's in our strategic plan, the problem-solving courts, and the foster youth rights and services. So, and again, I write those as issues instead of specific bills because that's how we interact with them. But does anybody see something that perhaps they don't think was indicated in our strategic plan that's an emerging issue that should be on this list that we're talking about today going into session?
No, we did a good job.
All right, do a good job. And we'll be watching as more things flow in. Of course, I'll keep commission members updated as we see things coming through. But I know that is, usually we have a vote on that since we're adding items to the list, so I have permissions.
So you're asking specifically for
Approval of the legislative engagement agenda.
any further discussion? If not, do I hear a motion? Thank you, Representative Summers. Is there a second? Thank you, Rep. Devon. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And that motion carries as well.
And now I get to sit down.
You get to sit down. And before we move on to our updates, I would like to jump back up to our minute approval. We did not do that because we did not yet have a quorum. So we do now. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. Next item is the task force and committee updates. And first up, we have Blaine with a few things. So I will just let him clarify.
Thanks, everybody. I'm here on behalf of our co-chairs who couldn't make it today. They are usually triple booked with meetings of their own. So they sent me with some stuff that I could share with you on updates as we look back into what we accomplished over 2025 and what we will do as we just voted for our strategic plan moving forward. So I first want to take a second to say thank you to all of our co-chairs and task force and committee members. There was a question earlier about membership on those groups. They are completely volunteers that take time out of their full-time jobs to attend those meetings and communicate with us in between them. So I just wanted to say thanks to them. My job is mainly bothering the co-chairs constantly. So I appreciate their patience with me and their energy and attitude towards helping out kids and families in Indiana is great. So shout out to them, and I appreciate all the work that they do with the Children's Commission. So first, our Child Health and Safety group. Our co-chairs are Sonia Rush from DCS and Olivia Shaw from the Department of Health. In 2025, they did a few big things. So primarily this group worked to support the IU School of Medicine Grassroots Maternal and Child Health Initiative. And what that does is it helps coordinate housing navigation, 12 months of rental assistance, and comprehensive case management for pregnant women who are housing insecure in Indianapolis. They also work to better support the needs of kinship caregivers with partnerships from DCS, the Villages, and many more of our community organizations that work to help aunts, uncles, grandparents, and other kinship placements. They helped encourage promising models for promoting healthy teen relationships and preventing unplanned pregnancy. And a lot of that was looking through trainings provided by LifeSmart Youth and what communities that can benefit from those trainings and what areas and counties in the state we can promote those to. They worked on some early interventions for young children, especially with reviewing policies and data that have to do with first steps and pregnancy promise. And then lastly, this group has also been incredibly helpful in assisting us and our network of lived experts in event content planning. So whether that be Day of the Child events in person or some of our online summits and trainings, those co-chairs and members of that group and the community voices there have been great in giving us good topics for discussion and training that our communities are interested in. Any questions for me to take back to Sonia and Olivia about our Child Health and Safety group? Moving on to our suicide prevention, bullying, and online safety. Our newest group and has our newest co-chairs. So Brooke Lawson is a licensed clinical social worker, and she's the director of mental health at Carmel Clay Schools. And Caitlin Short, who's a master of public health, is our newest hired state suicide prevention director at DMHA. Those two co-chair that group and resumed regular meetings scheduled in November of this year after vacancies during the summer. Our online safety subcommittee has been researching risks to youth and is interested in collecting additional data That group right now is in need of a youth co-chair, which Adriana and I have been working to fulfill that vacancy there. Suicide prevention itself has compiled secondary data and determined actions for 2026 based on data review in the new strategic plan. These include gathering youth perspectives on barriers to accessing help and the barriers to asking for help, gathering youth serving professionals' perspectives on those barriers as accessing helps cause pausing programs, funding, etc. They're looking to create a template or other resources to outline a structure to help getting, meaning people asking for help, and that communities can use to identify resources available in their area and assess if those resources are accessible to their community. They're looking at developing digestible resources to share with professionals that address two things. One, how to be or have services that are youth friendly, meaning different age groups understand those issues differently. So how do we make them translatable and digestible to the population overall, and especially those who may be considered vulnerable? And then two, what resources may be appropriate for prevention, crisis intervention, and postvention. For bullying prevention, they are in the process of reviewing data from the Department of Health through their youth risk behavior survey and their school health profiles. This subcommittee also had co-chair changes in this past year as well. Any questions for me about suicide prevention, bullying, and online safety? Yes, Devon.
So I do have a bill that we'll be looking at making some modifications, and we're not quite complete, so
Sure.
I know we're going to get it to DCS to review. I'd like to get it to DOE, and I'd like to see the committee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Task force, at least look at it.
Yeah. No, they will gladly look at it, and I can make sure that language gets put in front of all of them and they can tear it apart. And the others for our suicide prevention, bullying, and online safety group. And lastly, for me, I have our data sharing and mapping committee. This is chaired by Nikki Ford from DCS and Josie Fazolt from the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. This group works to help support or fulfill data requests from our task forces, especially when looking at overlapping data sets. They work closely with the Management Performance Hub to find ways to make data accessible to the public, and they were working to make it consistent across agencies and geographic areas. That's all I have for data sharing and mapping. Just want to remind you all as commission members and our task force and committee members that are maybe watching online that that group is always available for specific data requests you may have, whether it be geographic, issue-based, whatever. They love to review those and see where they can do some cross-sector collaboration on data sets that we may not be able to have publicly available all the time, but maybe by request. So that's always an option. Please reach out to me or Mark whenever you have that, and we can make sure you get connected with them. Any questions for me before I pass it to our task force and committee co-chairs who are in person with us here today? Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine. Up next, we have the Educational Outcomes Task Force, and Rebecca Fraser is here to report on that.
Thank you. I'm short, so I got to pull this down a little bit. I am Rebecca Fraser. I'm the school counseling specialist for the Department of Education. I've been part of the task force since I joined back in 2022. It doesn't seem like it's been that long, but they say time flies and you're having fun. But I just recently came on as the co-chair, as Michelle Clark, that was one of the co-chairs, left the DOE, and now she is back in the school setting. So this past year, we had a lot of changes with membership. So I'll share that with you a little bit as well. So we do have representatives on our team. We have a couple other members from the Department of Ed, Work Development, the Commission for Higher Education, Departments of Corrections, Juvenile Probation, Department of Mental Health and Addiction, Child Services, Voc Rehab, post-secondary education institutions, and then we also do have persons with lived experience, including juvenile justice, foster care, and others. But we are welcome to add other members to our committee if there are people that you feel need to be connected with us. So I won't go through all the goals step by step and line by line, just because Mark, I know, went over most of them, but I will say a couple that are a little bit different and related to school climate. We are promoting the increased use of restorative practices in schools, again, trying to be more positive focused and working with students that have challenges, behavior challenges or other identified needs as well. And including trauma-informed schools, and that's something that we work with at the department in just making educators aware that students more so increasingly are coming into the classroom with needs that are barriers to their education. So just trying to lead from that positive lens again as well. But again, we're open to adding to those goals and excited to hear from those of you that maybe have some suggestions in that work. So in looking at 2025, some highlights of things that our committee worked on, and one thing that I've been working on at the department obviously is the high school redesign and making sure that it is inclusive for students all across the state and that we're getting the word out about that diploma and supporting educators as they're wrapping their heads around that work and moving forward, but excited on that. But one thing I know Mark has been heavily involved in with Michelle and our team is at the department, another priority of ours is working on chronic absenteeism, because we know we can't help kids if they're not in the building. And unfortunately, a lot of those absentee issues there's barriers outside of the school or even in the school, again, with school climate or other things that are keeping kids from feeling comfortable to coming to school. So we're continuing to build on that work. And that's something that at the department, we're continuing to put out resources in that space through Dr. Jenner's weekly update. If you don't get that in your inbox every Friday, go to our website and sign up. All the initiatives coming in the department, including the new diploma options, will be put out there. So I always bookmark 15 minutes of my time every Friday with my coffee to look it over and see what's coming from the Department of Ed. We are continuing to collect data from youth, and we did look at some feedback from the Youth Summit from those that are in facilities or care. At the department, we have a ton of data that we're working on with us and the Commission on Higher Ed. So continuing to see and looking at trends and where we can focus our priorities. With that, we're also getting more voice from youth and those that have that lived experiences that are on different teams or within the SISC as well. And then lastly, we did increase some involvement with some community partners. If you're not aware, Fight for Your Life Foundation with Marlon Jackson that used to be with the Colts. It's still weird that I'm sitting on meetings with him after watching him play football for many years. But no, he's doing some incredible work and working with schools on mental health prevention, again, coming from those tier 1 services lens. And so I'm excited to increase that partnership as we move forward. Also working with Indiana University, with home educators, and many other partners as well. So we appreciate all the support we can get with that. So what is next? Again, as we shared, I'm a new co-chair. Also, Megan Carlson, she is the Health Services Director of IPS. She couldn't be with us in person today, but we're brand new co-chairs to the team. So I know we really appreciate Blaine bugging us and letting us know what we need to get done, but we would love to hear from you all as well if there are things that we can do differently moving forward. We are continuing to support those student-focused legislative priorities. I also am on the Indiana School Counselor Association board, so wearing lots of hats and again, just being involved in the legislative process and where we can advance some of the work that we're doing. Looking at current data and finding those baselines again, just figuring out where we can really make an impact and reviewing the data that's out there and coming up with our priorities and continuing that collaboration between state agencies and those community partners. And then also looking at other states as well and seeing if there are some best practices that we can lean on or absolve into our work also. So that is all I have. Again, this is my, I think, second meeting as co-chair. So, so I don't know what I don't know yet, but I appreciate your support.
Questions for Rebecca?
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca, not only for today, but also the last 2 years and stepping up as co-chair. So that's right. Next up, we have the Juvenile Justice and Cross System Youth Task Force. And I know we have Judge Harvey. We did have Judge Harvey online. Not sure if she's still there. If not, Nancy, are you going to take that one?
I'm here.
Yes, yes.
Hi, Judge Harvey.
Hi there.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Weaver, and I serve as the Director of Youth Justice Initiatives at the Indiana Office of Court Services. And I'm here today in my co-chair role with Judge Harvey as the co-chair of the Juvenile Justice and Cross-System Youth Task Force. Last time, I think you're going to hear that name because, as Mark indicated, we are changing some focus. Thank you very much for the opportunity to give some updates about what's been going on the past 3 years, past year, but also the past 3 years as we wrap up the current strategic plan. The first, first, I think you have this in your materials, but these are our members. We have a wide and diverse representation. We consider lots of different perspectives when we make recommendations to you all. I'm not going to go through all of those, but you have them certainly to review. Next is the just overview of the strategic goal and the objectives that you all gave us 3 years ago. I'm going to go through these in just a little more detail as we move forward. Judge Harvey, I think, is going to take objective 1, right?
Yes, I am.
Awesome.
So I'm more familiar with this because I am sitting as a subcommittee co-chair on this for the CSEC committee. And this is just an overview of what we've been able to accomplish and a couple bullet points on what we want to accomplish in the next cycle. So we've worked on updating our screening tool for human trafficking, and those are being utilized in probation departments, and hopefully as it goes forward, we will have every department using those as they with that screener tool. And we also put that online, so through Insight, I believe. So that's been a really, it's been a success. We also worked on training multiple sites. I know I conducted a training. Judge Dowling has conducted multiple trainings across the state, just educating folks, some on just a 101, what's human trafficking, others a little bit more detailed. We've had really good success in drawing people from all areas to those trainings. We also have quick indicator cards that have been developed. These are cards that are, you can attach to a keychain that law enforcement officers, different points in the system can, and I think we're working on for nurses as well. I can't remember. Just to have as kind of bullet points, what are you looking for, what are the indicators of potential trafficking? And those have been an interesting development. So I'm proud to say that just prior to this meeting last week, the CSEC committee also met, and there is a draft strategic plan that we've worked on for what we want going forward. And that includes looking at potential legislation, some maybe working on trying to get some training on human trafficking required, specifically possibly in the nursing area. I think there is especially Judge Dowling is really wanting to remove prostitution as a delinquent act. The 3.5 CHINS language, we've brought that before the commission before. We had approval, and we'd like to see that go forward in legislation this time around. And also looking at an enhancement on penalties for purchasing if the person purchased is a child on trafficking. We would then look to develop more training opportunities utilizing grant money to train the trainer, meaning that Judge Dowling is on her way to retirement. She's been a primary water carrier for this training, and we'd like to have others qualified to do that. So that's part of the focus, as well as looking and expanding our base of professionals who are educated on trafficking so that we can broaden the scope of who might be eyes on the situation. So that is a real small nutshell of what we hope to accomplish. I feel very good about saying that we got a lot of things done in the last 3 years on that subcommittee. So that's all for that one.
Any questions on objective 1? Objective 2 related to adoption of effective policies around juvenile status offense cases. And those would be offenses that are delinquent acts because of the young person's status as a juvenile. So anybody under the age of 18, primarily runaway, truancy, minor in possession of alcohol, those kinds of offenses. We had a subcommittee. I know we have to change language to work group. We'll work hard to do that. That's been co-chaired by Tracy Fitz from IPAC and Leah Pezzarosi, who is a executive director of one of the shelter care agencies down in southeastern Indiana. They really, status offenses are huge. And so they narrowed their focus to chronic absenteeism and truancy. But then the YJOC came along and the Best Youth Initiative came along and the diversion work group of the YJOC came along. And so they were really, it was one of those points that Mark talked about earlier. It was really a question of, wow, are we duplicating or overlapping? They did wind up their work around chronic absenteeism and truancy. They have a report that they've been working on. We do hope to be able to present that to you in February, at your February meeting, and we'll probably sunset that work group because there's not a specific place in the new strategic plan for that, but it is, not with our task force anyway. It certainly is taken up by a whole lot of other groups. Any questions about that? And objective 3 was related to outcomes for children with an incarcerated parent. That work groups, subcommittee is, work group now, started off strong, co-chaired by Joel Winnicky, who was then with the Public Defender Council. He's now with Child Advocates, and Steve Balco, who's with the Department of Education. Both of them have transitioned to new agencies and or roles. And so there was a bit of a lull in their work for a while. They originally, one of their successes is that they did partner successfully with the folks who are working on Objective 4, which I'll get to in a minute. But they originally were taking on, it was huge, and they were talking about incarcerated folks in both jails and prisons. They decided to focus more on jails because that is where adults are incarcerated for shorter periods of time, and they thought they'd have more impact if they could work on policies of visitation and those kinds of things in jails. The other thing that they worked on was fatherhood initiatives. So there are some places in the Department of Correction specifically that work very hard to promote fatherhood engagement with their children. Again, that work has kind of been through a lull, but as of last week, we reconvened and they have some new energy, and the task force did vote to continue this work under the new strategic plan, under the one that relates to engagement of parents and children. Any questions about that? Okay, and then Judge Harvey's going to take Objective 4.
Sure. Just to kind of segue something that Nancy just mentioned, and one that, I think the last in-person meeting I attended is this legislation for access for families in secure detention. So this particular subcommittee worked on that as well. So that is something definitely excited to see that it's come to fruition and something more concrete. Also, the subcommittee worked on promoting legislation that would create a minimum age for juvenile court jurisdiction based on some of the data and the research that the committee had found. And I think that they probably will want to continue to work on that as well, because they had put a lot of time into that. So is there anything else? You have any questions about this particular objective? No? Okay. So what's ahead? So it was exciting last week. We met as a task force, and with having the strategic plan kind of in front of us, what are we going to be doing? The first one is something we've been doing this week, and that is Nancy has sent out a survey for those who will be interested in continuing on. So at this point, we are just gathering the troops, so to speak, and getting those folks who are want to continue work on the task force. And then out of that, the plan is then to take the strategic plan and organize our subcommittees and have folks assigned to the committee. So in our next meeting, we'll be looking at that. I think it's scheduled in February. Also, as Nancy indicated, one leftover is the presentation of the report on the status offense. So that will be coming to you in the new year. And we're just excited to get to work. As I mentioned to those members on our last meeting, just this short amount of time that I've been being able to sit on as chair, seeing the just getting my sleeves rolled up a little bit more, real excited on what we have accomplished, but also super excited about the focus of our task force in the coming year. So I hope to have a lot more to report back in terms of what we can get accomplished. So thank you for allowing me today to be here by Zoom and to continue to do the work here, which is very important.
Any questions? We do consider this an opportunity to do the work, and we appreciate you all letting us do this. Judge Harvey and I are committed to co-chairing for a little bit longer. And our work groups are very active, yes, our task force and our work groups are very active in everything that we are tasked with taking on.
So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Judge Harvey. I appreciate her service, and she made it a point to step away from her bench and spend a whole day during strategic planning. So when she says she's rolling up her sleeves, she really is rolling up her sleeves and doing the work. So we appreciate you, Judge Harvey.
Thank you. I'm going to step off and go back to my bench now, if you
All right.
don't mind. Thank you very much.
All right. Next up, we will turn our attention to mental health and substance use, and we've got Tanya Merritt-Malumba here to report on that.
There. My name is Tanya Merritt-Malumba, and I am the co-chair of the Mental Health and Substance Use Task Force. And first, I apologize for being late. I have double booked, so I wasn't able to be here for the first half of the meeting, but I am here now and excited to be talking with you about our work over the past year. So I will just say that I've been flying solo for the second half of this year. David Reed, who used to be a co-chair with me, left the state, and so I've been doing this work, co-chairing this committee, and kind of corralling and getting my feet wet. I'm fairly new to the commission in general, so it's been a learning experience, and I'm happy to continue on. And so over the past year, one of the primary things that we have focused on, or one of our primary accomplishments, is working to support the implementation and rollout of the multisystemic therapy, MST, which I think you guys have a handout for. We have supported efforts to roll out new providers to do this work across the state. MST is a family and community-based interventions that focuses on, for those kids aged 12 to 17 who have involvement with juvenile justice and anti-social kinds of behaviors, and the therapy, as you can see just from the data, some of the accomplishments that have happened over the past year, and the work that has been done by primarily led by Dr. Gabby, who's one of our task force members. So she's been really spearheading this and working very closely with state partners and other community partners to spearhead this work, and has done a really phenomenal job and helping to support standing up this program across the state. So it's been successful to this point. Youth who have engaged, we've served 193 kids so far, and the outcomes have, as you can see, kids are improving, they're getting better, they're having less engagement with they're staying home, they're staying in school, or they're working, they're having less engagements, no new arrests and things like that. So that has been very helpful, and it's one of our primary accomplishments that we are happy to report on. And looking forward to the upcoming year, our team did some work on just really kind of revising some of our goals. So for example, the introduction of early childhood is a newer focus for us. So we're happy to have and expand our committee to have some additional team members to focus on early childhood, which is, like I said, a new point of focus. And also there were other opportunities to expand membership as it relates to workforce. So definitely have gotten some new interest and excited about that. So we'll have some new people join our task force to kind of cover some of those areas that we're kind of lacking in the past year. We've also are continuing our work in the prevention as well as children with high acuity needs, and ensuring that all the work that we do is kind of grounded in evidence-based practice and supports for these populations. And yeah, all the work that we are planning to do and hoping to do in the coming years as we work on the new strategic planning goals is, like I said, grounded and to ensuring that the services, supports, and opportunities that we are going to be engaging in leans towards that evidence-based practice work. And that's it. Anybody have any specific questions? All right.
All right. Thank you, Tanya, especially for doing all the heavy lifting for your committee. So we appreciate you.
Do you need that? Would you like to have a co-chair or?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think it was more hands is my definitely, 100%. So if there's anyone that's interested and you know someone and you someone who wants to help fill this role, absolutely. I definitely work with the opportunity to partner with whoever who knows.
The recommendation.
I don't have a recommendation right now. I think, but I can definitely give us a thought. I was kind of, since our last meeting, I really been focused on just thinking about the task force, the different, and thinking about that. That's what I kind of been thinking about, but I haven't thought more so about a particular recommendation for a co-chair. So I'm open to suggestions. If you have thoughts or want to see people my way, if any of you guys have a recommendation, I'm definitely, I welcome the opportunity to get any help I can get. But I will say too that after we lost our previous co-chair, people have definitely still stepped up and helped. We've continued to receive support from the administrative assistant at DCS to help with agendas and things like that. So she has been a tremendous help in that regard, even though Dave is no longer co-chairing it. His admin who was working with us has continued to help. So that's been a tremendous help in and of itself, just sitting meeting invites and making sure people have agendas and things like that. So that's been a help, but definitely, I think there's always, I think this work, the more heads and hands-on and people who know all the things and could be very helpful. So I welcome opportunities to, hopefully you have some recommendations. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Any other commission discussion regarding our task force and committee updates? If not, we'll move right into the youth, family, and caregiver engagement presentation. We've got Adriana here with us today.
Good almost afternoon, everybody. How are we doing? My name is Adriana Lindgren. For those of you who don't know me, I am the engagement coordinator here at the Children's Commission. My role is specific to our youth, family, and caregiver engagement initiatives. I've been here for about the past 3 months. I have the privilege of supporting our youth representatives here on the commission, as well as our LIFT experts at the task force and work group level. I'm also responsible for supporting our engagement efforts with our engagement partners and our general practices. So I'd like to take just a couple minutes to talk about what our engagement work has looked like since I've come on in the past, like since the House Bill 1098 has come in, things like that. So as you may know, House Bill 1098 charged us with creating a statewide plan to support youth, family, and caregiver engagement in the state policymaking process as it relates to youth and families in Indiana. We are currently in the preliminary planning process for this plan, getting an idea of what all should be included, who all should be involved in the development process, and what all may be needed to complete it. Because we at the Commission are uniquely positioned at the crossroads of legislation, state agencies, community organizations, and community members, we are fortunate to have the opportunity to pull a lot of data, insights, and expertise from a wide network. For this reason, we can anticipate including at least like 5-ish categories of information in the plan, although the actual structure and content is forthcoming. So number one, the most up-to-date research on LIFT expert engagement in the policymaking process. Number two, learned best practices from or on advocacy and engagement from our LIFT experts, as well as from our agency and organizational partners. Number three, a general guide to who all in the state of Indiana is championing engagement work including lived experts practicing peer empowerment, organizations providing advocacy and engagement training, and state agencies that are either already practicing effective engagement or have opportunities already built out to do that work. Number 4, identified priority areas for engagement for lived expert youth, families, and caregivers. Essentially, where do they most want to get plugged in and what do they most want to see changed? Number 5, identified areas for improvement with individualized next steps for each of the different players in the policymaking process. Essentially, how do we plan on bridging the gap between what we are currently doing, what we are capable of doing, and what our community wants us to be doing? Again, these are just preliminary guideposts for what this plan may entail, and it will definitely grow and change as it's being developed. One of the main collaborators that we look forward to developing this engagement plan with is our new Youth, Family, and Caregiver Voices Committee, which we just voted to approve. So looking forward to that. As Mark mentioned earlier, this new committee being included in our strategic plan was made in response to feedback from you all here during our strategic planning session, as well as from a broader network of stakeholders and collaborators, which pointed very clearly to the need for intentional, organized engagement efforts. So I'll just read the excerpt from the strategic plan, even though I know you just reviewed it, so sorry to be repetitive. It says that the Youth, Family, and Caregiver Voices Committee will support the Commission and its task forces by ensuring the integration of lived experience voices into our policies and practices and vetting all Commission recommendations. The committee will also lead the creation and revision of the statewide Youth, Family, and Caregiver Engagement Plan. So we can expect more specific objectives on the engagement plan in the near future as the Voices Committee shapes its creation, its content, and its structure according to their informed vision for what state level engagement should be looking like moving forward. You can expect updates on the plan's development to be delivered accordingly throughout that process as well. Zooming out a little, the Voices Committee will also have more to it than just the engagement plan. As of right now, the vision for this group is twofold, both in that it may be a supportive space for collaboration and peer empowerment for the lived experts that make it up, and that it may be a vetting and development body that informs and oversees the work that we do here. Membership for this group will likely include individuals in our internal lived expert network. So that's our youth representatives here on the Commission, our lived experts on our task forces and our committees, as well as lived experts in our external lived expert network as well. So that's individuals that we work with the Best Youth Initiative, Foster Success, the Indian Youth Advisory Board, places like that. It may potentially also include individuals who are engaged in the bridging work between community members and policymakers as well. But similar to the design of the engagement plan, the structure for this committee will also be formulated as the committee itself is being formulated so that it can change and develop organically in response to what the network of lived experts need and prefer for that group. So my hope is that it will be able to be a space that is empowering to them, fruitful to their work, and instrumental in shaping what we do and how we do it. So we're looking forward to seeing how that group structures itself as it's being created under the new strategic plan, how they will collaborate on the statewide engagement plan, and how this network we are strengthening will bolster engagement at all levels of our work. So updates to come as we bridge into the new year for sure. One engagement opportunity that we are looking forward to coming up is the 2026 Day of the Child event, which is happening this upcoming President's Day on February 16th. Registration for this event went live on December 1st. So if you are planning to attend or have youth in your network who are interested in attending, there is a registration link and more information on McCoy's website. As of right now, we are currently expecting the usual flow of the day with a welcome message from McCoy around 9:30 in the morning, committee hearings and the youth advocacy resource fair until around 1 in the afternoon, and the State of the Child presentation from the Indiana Youth Institute around lunchtime before the House and Senate sessions begin. The specific timeline, particularly with respect to that IYI presentation, will largely depend on when they're able to get a chamber and when committee hearings and sessions are set to be taking place. So you can expect more specific guidance on timing as we learn more about the chamber schedule prior to our next meeting at the beginning of February. So that is what I have. Thank you for letting me take some time with you today. I did go ahead and include my contact information on the screen. So as always, at any time, if you ever have any questions, ideas, or just want to chat about our engagement work, my inbox is always open. I'm happy to talk. Thanks.
You can tell from Adriana's energy today that she's hit the ground running. Any questions for Adriana? Thank you. All right, next up on our agenda are 2026 Commission meeting dates. Mark, do you want to say anything about those?
No, I think main thing other than our usual kind of rotation there, we did elect to bump up the February meeting to as early in February as possible because the legislature is kind of hitting the ground running and trying to go quickly. So we want to make sure if there's that final item or two that we might need to jump in on before session wraps up, we're doing that soon enough to get in there. So Hopefully that doesn't fall on a day that doesn't work for all of our legislators and everything else, but we'll know that when we get closer, as is usually the drill.
All right, we have a few minutes remaining for any commission member announcements. So we'll start, why don't we start over here with Sarah? Anything you would like to add today?
I don't think we have anything from DMHA today.
All right, Terry,
Nope, nothing from us. Thank you.
Emma,
Nothing for me.
Jada,
Nothing for me as well.
Rep. Devon.
That's not quite true.
What? Which part?
You're,
Oh.
show them your fingers.
I got engaged.
Nothing more for me.
I'm good, thank you.
Rep. Summers,
I'm good. Happy holidays. We won't see each other.
Eden.
No, but thank you.
And do we have anyone left online, Bernice or other?
This is Bernice. Nothing from IPDC, and happy holidays to everyone. Great meeting.
Can I have a privilege of the floor with Bernice since she's up there?
Sure.
So about a month ago, she talked me into at the Public Defenders Conference in South Bend that I attended, and she wasn't there.
Now, I never said I was going to be there.
She kind of goofed me on that.
Rep. Devon, thank you so much. The defenders who were present, many of them who are from St. Joe County and nearby, really appreciated your presence. Seriously, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Happy holidays and safe travels.